And I'm calling it a perfect life. In 1922, in colonial Calcutta, on the roof of a small house on Ultadanga Junction Road, in the soft shadows of the early evening, a young man met his spiritual master, Om Vishnupad Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. That young man, known at the time as Abhay Charan De, was His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And so our story begins. It is one of courage in the face of overwhelming adversity. It is the story of a compassion so deep that it breaks the heart of one who understands it. Never had Abhay heard the message of Sri Chaitanya presented so boldly, so convincingly, and with such urgency. The meeting included a challenge. Why don't you go and present Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's message in the Western world? Leaving with Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's words still ringing in his ears, Abhay thought, quote, if I was not married, I could join his mission immediately, end quote. But Abhay had his family responsibilities. Therefore he resolved, let me succeed in business and thus help fund his mission. It was not an unreasonable proposal. Abhay was well educated, his family well connected, and both his palm and his chart predicted that he would achieve great wealth. And yet, in his business endeavors, he met with disappointment and setbacks again and again. Finally, after 3 decades plus of trying, and having finished his family duties, Abhay retired to Vrindavan to consider his future and how to execute the order of his spiritual master. He knew his time was marked. The end of his life was not that far off. Going to the West was now or never. Taking sannyas and having printed the first 3 volumes of his Bhagavatam commentary, he was ready. Departing from Calcutta in August 13, 1965, Prabhupada stepped on board the Jaladuta, bound for the USA. But his path there was not greased with speed or ease. After 10 days on the boat, Prabhupada wrote in his diary, rain, seasickness, dizziness, headache, no appetite, vomiting. And as noted in the Lilamrita, the pains in his chest made him think that he would die at any moment. In 2 days, he'd suffered 2 heart attacks. He tolerated the difficulty, meditating on the purpose of his mission. But after 2 days of such violent attacks, he thought if another were to come, he would certainly not survive. Finally, on September 9th, he wrote, At 4 this afternoon, we have crossed over the Atlantic Ocean for 24 hours. The whole day was clear and almost smooth. I'm taking my food regularly, and I've got some strength to struggle. There was also a slight tacking of the ship, and I'm feeling a slight headache also. But I am struggling, and the nectarine of life is Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, the source of my vitality. After 35 days, the Jaladuta finally arrived in Boston Harbor. Observing the skyline of America City for the first time, Srila Prabhupada wrote, most of the population here is covered by the material mode of ignorance and passion. Absorbed in material life, they think themselves very happy and satisfied, and therefore they have no taste for the transcendental message of Vasudeva. I do not know how they will be able to understand it, but I guess you have some purpose, some business here. Otherwise, why would you bring me to this terrible place? What followed was such a profound display of tolerance, perseverance, courage, and compassion that it can be comprehended only by breaking it down to its component parts. Lest this narration become too long, let us consider only a few examples. While recovering his strength in Butler, Pennsylvania, Prabhupada endured Sally Agarwal's cooking boiled beef in the oven, broiled beef, and saying, "Sorry for the smell, Swamiji," as she flapped her apron trying to air out the kitchen. In New York City, drunks would pass out on the staircase and thus block the entrance to his small room in the Bowery. Srila Prabhupada kindly noted, they would sometimes call out to each other saying, "Here comes Swami," and roll to the side, thus allowing me to pass. In this way they were offering their obeisances. On a far more dangerous level, he was chased out of his shared living space by his roommate who'd become crazed by LSD and was now wielding a knife and babbling incoherent threats. There was a third attack that had left a constant dull ringing in his head that lasted for a year and a half. And that was not the struggle, and it was not that the struggle ended once Prabhupada got ISKCON up and running. One of his personal assistants, a recent sannyas initiate, was caught drying homegrown marijuana in the oven of the LA kitchen. A trusted disciple from early days sold the temple in Hawaii and left with the money. After Srila Prabhupada had worked so hard to start his project in Juhu, bewildered disciples gave the land back to the cunning and conniving seller, Mr. Nair. The struggle continued and was so fierce that at one point the devotees joked, as we have temples named New Vrindavan and New Dwarka, we can name this temple New Kurukshetra. Yet Prabhupada continued to forgive, to reinvigorate those fallen disciples who were willing to try again. And by sheer determination alone, he simply moved on. Krishna reciprocated with Prabhupada's selfless surrender. One such golden confirmation was the New York Ratha Yatra of 1976. With 3 enormous and gorgeously decorated carts, hundreds of dancing disciples, the street lined by tens of thousands of onlookers, swept up in the enthusiasm of the moment, came Lord Jagannath, triumphantly sailing down Fifth Avenue, America's parade route used to congratulate conquering heroes. Let us close our story on another rooftop, far from the one in Calcutta so many years ago. Sitting on the rooftop patio of ISKCON's Manhattan skyscraper building, after the jubilant 1976 Ratha Yatra, Prabhupada looked over the skyline of New York, that same city that had originally greeted him so indifferently. He contemplated how far his mission had come. As amazing gifts were born out of the churning of the celestial milk ocean, by the churning of the ocean of ISKCON, Prabhupada had given the world 108 temples, many with magnificent deities. He'd initiated close to 5,000 disciples. Millions of books full of sublime Vedic wisdom had been placed in the hands of relief-hungry, conditioned souls. There were farms, restaurants, schools, traveling bus parties, colorful Ratha Yatras, and lively festivals spread across the globe. Lord Chaitanya's prediction to reach every town and village was rolling forward, propelled by these great waves from his ISKCON. Against all odds, from such humble beginnings, who would have predicted such an implausible story of success? One has to wonder, what was the cause? The answer is found in Srila Prabhupada's implacable and audacious personal conviction in the purifying power of the holy name and the potency of the order of his spiritual master. I could never do a pinch of what Prabhupada has done. But because I can't do everything, I should do nothing? Let me at least do what I can do. Let me give up my attachments, petty and paltry as they are. I can give up my arrogance. I can put my shoulder to the wheel of Srila Prabhupada's mission and push with all the strength at my command. In these ways, I hope to someday begin to repay Prabhupada for all that he has given me and given to the world by the guiding light of his perfect life. Your obliged and indebted, unqualified, Hey Govinda, and most grateful servant, Bhajan Swami.
Hare Krishna, Hare Bol. Thank you, Maharaj. We'd like to ask Srimati Sachi Devi to be the next speaker. Hare Krishna.
Here you go.
All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to our beloved Srila Prabhupada. Again, I find myself having to follow my exalted God brother, Bhajunarayan Prabhu. I'll read part of my offering. I was thinking this morning, okay. We were talking about the devotees trying to hear Srila Prabhupada in the garden. Those of you who were here 2 nights ago. And that Prabhupada didn't object because he wanted us to hear. He wanted us to hear what he was saying. This one day when we were kind of eavesdropping, Prabhupada roared like a lion. And it felt like the earth shook. Prabhupada was so angry and so upset. And what we found out is there were impersonalists, Sunyavadis, in the garden that were discounting that Krishna was the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That maybe Krishna had a human form, that was a human form emanating from the Brahmajyoti or some nonsense. We actually shook. We were so aware of how Srila Prabhupada was defending his most beloved Sri Krishna. And yet Prabhupada could be like a rose, like a lion or like a rose. And he was like a rose with me, fortunately, because he knew what we could handle. You know, some of the world leaders and world Sankirtan and, stalwarts could handle a lot of chastisement, direction. He treated me like a daughter, and that's exactly what I needed. I can say that on your first visit, soon after I had moved into the temple, I experienced a few extraordinary moments that set a solid, unshakable, and sublime relationship as your eternal daughter. I was very eagerly waiting at the bottom of the stairs situated in the front of the temple on La Cienega. This is 1969. I had just been at the temple for a few weeks. Your Divine Grace noticed my extreme exuberance and approached me from the top of a few stairs. I was exuberant because I was so relieved I had finally found shelter. I'd finally found what I was looking for and I felt safe. So Prabhupada noticed this, and with your expansive smile and genuine and unconditional love, you inquired, "Are you happy now?" And my new life had rescued me from feeling lost, forlorn, and beaten up and beaten down, and my face reflected that. Your golden, effulgent head was elevated a few feet above mine as you looked downwards. The backdrop was a perfectly Southern California blue. The world melted away. The loud, blissful singing became muffled. I was transported to a very different and wondrous reality that I shall never forget. As best as I could, I answered, "Oh, yes." That was the foundation for my life in Krishna consciousness as your despairing disciple. I had never felt so safe, so loved, and so sheltered. At last I was blessed with total contentment and unconditional love that I believe every soul vehemently seeks but rarely finds. My dear most beloved Srila Prabhupada, my ever well-wisher, in the ensuing 8 years or so of your Vapu in our midst, you constantly gave me complete shelter. Your shelter came both personally as well as philosophically through your lectures, your example, and your glorious and belabored extensive library of translated Vedic gems with copious purports. You have declared these books to be the law books for the next 10,000 years. For me, this entire Krishna consciousness is mostly beyond my grasp. But you have comforted us in that this is a descending process. I was reading this morning how Prabhupada said, just learn to love Krishna. You may not understand him, but just learn to love him like the residents of Vrindavan. They are our example. It is by your mercy, the mercy of Lord Chaitanya and Lord Krishna, this is a descending process, that the imports and mysteries of this vast body of Vedic literature are imparted to us transcendentally through our hearts in proportion to our sincerity and our purity. All glories to you, Srila Prabhupada. I wanted to, I haven't lived here. I joined in 69 and moved with Bhaktivedanta, the school, up to Three Rivers in 81, and I have not lived here since then. I just want to thank the stalwart devotees here. There are so many numerous to mention that the service that you're doing is just incalculable, and I just appreciate it so much, Swavas and his brother, his dear brother. There's so many names I can't even remember, but thank you for putting on this festival. Thank you for carrying on the quality of deity worship here that Srila Prabhupada wanted so much. I feel like he's so pleased. Thank you so much.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Mataji. Now let's ask Rameshwar Prabhu to speak. Yes. Yeah.
Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna. What I wrote, I left in Archita's apartment. So I'm going to speak extemporaneously. I wanted to add two things to this amazing offering that His Holiness Bhaji Narayan Maharaj spoke to Prabhupada about, which I remember from both the Lilamrita and from Yadabara's amazing movie about Srila Prabhupada.
Since we're having a problem with positioning, I think it's better to just hold the microphone. That way, wherever you look, wherever you turn, the mic is with you.
Whatever you command.
Hare Krishna.
And for those of you who have any access to a DVD player and a TV, today of all days is the best day to re-watch that movie that Yadobar gave to the world about Prabhupada. And you see his life struggle and how it ended up being this amazing movement. It's captured so perfectly. So two scenes in that movie and in the Lilamrita. When Prabhupada was leaving Butler to come to Manhattan, his hosts were so concerned. He had never seen snow. He was about to enter New York City's winter, one of the worst winters, and he had little sandals. He had a thin dhoti. I mean, this is what Prabhupada completely tolerated, as we heard in his class today. The other thing is, just before he moved down to 2nd Avenue, he had an uptown apartment that was his place, a single room. They call those SROs, single room only apartments in New York. And he had his little typewriter, and he was composing the Bhagavad Gita. And one day, when he came back from a walk, the door had been broken in, his typewriter and papers had been stolen. So when you think heart attacks, pain, no money. I mean, who comes to America with $7 with no one in New York sponsoring him, just out in Butler, and then to be robbed? And he didn't turn back, which any other human would have done. But he's not just a human. I shared this with Bhadri Maharaj and Savas. Once I saw Prabhupada so glowing. He had just finished a massage, and his dhoti and kurta, this silk golden effulgent appearance that he made when he came out. I was waiting in the sitting room. I just blurted out, "Prabhupada, you look like the greatest king that's ever lived. He's so magnificent. And he looked at me with a little gravitous frown. And he said, I am much more than a king. Prabhupada didn't often say things like that about himself. So we know, and it's not just a matter of faith, we know he's from Goloka. He's not from Calcutta. He's not from the cycles of births and deaths. He's from Goloka. Because there was some very rare, intimate conversations that Prabhupada had with devotees where, in the rarest of moments, he would confide, like a conversation with Krishna, wanting him to go down and him not wanting to come here. Here being the universe, this material world. And Lord Chaitanya and Krishna ordering him to come to save the fallen souls of this universe and to empower him to present the Vedic knowledge to the entire world for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. And there are some very rare conversations where he reveals he's from Goloka. Don't doubt it. That's who walked the earth. Within our memory or within our lifetime, a person from Goloka walked the earth to save us. This is who you are, Srila Prabhupada. So, I want to give credit to my godbrother, Srila Prabhupada. He shared with me thoughts about Prabhupada today that echo my own. So, giving him that credit for reminding me. What is it that Prabhupada came to? He came to a country that was almost like in a civil war with itself over race and over foreign wars like Vietnam. And an entire generation of young people, mostly, not everyone, was revolting from their own country. And what were they turning to? They were turning to drugs. They had a motto, sex, drugs, rock and roll, which was sex music. That was their motto. They had this idea to not fight in Vietnam and just to be hippies. And they thought that would bring peace to the world. They had so many misconceptions about what brings real peace. What is the real cause of wars? I remember so many times in my mind a conversation I had with Prabhupada at the Dallas airport where he was describing the causes of this Vietnam War that my generation went through. And we all thought he was going to say again that because he had said this in classes, that due to the meat-eating leaders and the meat animal-killing culture, there had to be wars as a reaction. So I thought he was going to say that again. And he said, no. In addition to that, the demons had come to the earth. They had taken over different countries. They forced that war to go on and on and on. I said, why? And Prabhupada said, because they wanted to kill the hippies and the black men who were in revolt. That's what Prabhupada told us sitting in the airport in Dallas. In addition to the reaction of all the meat eating and cow killing, there was another conspiracy to kill those who were going against the culture. But that the world that Prabhupada came to had no idea what the real peace formula was, had no idea that sex was the cause of repeated birth and death, the actual hardest bond to break, the chain that ties us to this cycle. And that taking intoxicants and drugs and just thinking that's what's going to make me happy is just the opposite. That's the world he came to. And those few people in my generation that thought of something spiritual, the only books available to us were Mayavadi concepts. We thought of spiritual India as you can become one with God, you become God. He had to confront all of this. And imagine trying to convince hippies that Krishna, God, tells Arjuna, you have to fight against your own family. Could you imagine? Hippies who are dropping out and protesting in war, and that's his message? Hippies that are so addicted to this sex music and hallucinogenics. And Prabhupada saying, no, you have to give that all up if you want to not commit suicide, if you want to save your own soul. You have to give up sex, give up meat eating, give up intoxications. How could he present this message to people who were so addicted to something completely contrary and make thousands and thousands of initiate disciples and inspire us to sell millions of his books and people all over the world learning the holy names? It's just incredible what Prabhupada accomplished. No one else could have convinced meat eaters to give up meat, to give up sex mongers, to give up sex, to convince hippies to give up drugs. He had a power that no one else in the entire Gaudiya Sampradaya at that point in the world could even come close to. That's our Prabhupada. Just so powerful. Sent to save us. Sent to save the human race for thousands and thousands of years. So I, for myself, not deserving to be forgiven for mistakes and many things I have done offending devotees, but crawling back to you, Prabhupada, my ardent prayer is that you'll not let me go. Give me the privilege of devotional service so that when I chant every morning, you are my Lord, birth after birth, I mean that very sincerely, that I can't think of a greater thing than if I could take many births in your Sankirtan movement and have you as my Lord and Master. That continues to be my wish, my prayer, this begging for that. Hare Krishna. Thank you, Srila Prabhupada.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Ramachandra Prabhu. David Ahiti, Mahatati.
Dear Srila Prabhupada, as I reflect upon this day of your Vyāsa-pūjā, I keep wondering about your appearance in this world. Yes, divine indeed. You had a mission and you completed it as your time on earth was short. Somehow, my good fortune was to have your divine association. You built this temple and many others, and tried to raise our standards to at least human. Your achievements are unlimited, as you were directed by Krishna himself. How can I even glorify one who is unlimited, merciful, loving, kind, compassionate, truthful? You foresaw the future, and you spoke of the trouble we would encounter. You tried to prepare us for what was coming. We are so young and foolish, so much illusion, but you could cut through it all in one sentence. Yet, we are still here because our love and faith in you. All these years have passed, yet we are still holding on to your lotus feet. You planted the seed, dropped the spiritual bombs, and offered us to Lord Shri Krishna. How else could we exist? Praying on this day for some small service to make a difference in your divine mission, to appreciate what you have given us. Your words resonate in my soul daily. You said the whole show is only temporary. You said the cities would be bloodbaths. So many instructions that are to come. Please, Srila Prabhupada, don't let me forget your soft lotus feet, your gentle manner, and your transcendental message. Help me execute your instructions and help me make some progress in this life and to be true to you. Thank you, Srila Prabhupada. Thank you.
Thank you, Matsuri. Rabindranath Prabhu, next.
Hare Krishna. From my respectful obeisances, Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Śrīla Prabhupada. I met him in the early 70s. I was coming here to watch Sika. I believe the first time I saw him give a class was here in the old, where the doll museum is right here, and he was speaking. The devotees were, I was coming to the temple for some time, and they said, come, Śrīla Prabhupada's here now, Śrīla Prabhupada's here now, come to the morning Bhagavatam class. So I came, and he was lecturing from the second canto Śrīmad Bhagavatam about how the eyes, one who doesn't see the form of the Lord, his eyes like the eyes in a peacock. So he was lecturing that way, and I very much appreciate the words of Śrīla Prabhupada. They're full of absolute truth, and his activities are all wonderful. And when I saw so many of his lectures, and I would personally attend them, but to get close to Śrīla Prabhupada was very difficult unless you were had a big managerial position or a sannyasi. Then it was very difficult. So I made it a point, because I would try to get in front of Śrīla Prabhupada, and then other devotees would get close, and I would get pushed back to the wall like that. So I decided to stand behind Śrīla Prabhupada's Vyāsa-son and stand my ground, and this way I would hear his words and see him, and I would just stare at the back of his head. I noticed that because he was older, he didn't have much hair. He would shave his head, but he didn't have much hair either. So, but I noticed his sika, which consists of a sika, was just little. Was very big, real round and big in the back, but just a few little hairs sticking out of it like that. And then later on, I saw in photographs that he had a sika on the lower part of his neck like that, or down farther. So I would watch Srila Prabhupada, and we would try to get glimpses of Srila Prabhupada whenever we could. We used to go up into what was called the household of Prashadam room, where they had the puppet show for the children during the Sunday feast, and we would look down at Prabhupada from the windows up there, because he would go into his garden, I think it was like every day during a certain time. And I remember somebody came up and said, stop doing that. Don't stare at Srila Prabhupada, it's impolite. So they would say like that, but we didn't care, we just kept on staring. And Srila Prabhupada, after his breakfast, they would bring his prashadam, his remnants, into the kitchen, which was ever left. And I noticed his oranges, the way they served Prabhupada's oranges, they cut them in quarters, and then Prabhupada would just put them in his mouth and just get out the juice and leave the rind on the skin, like that. And I remember once Hari Sari gave me some extra milk that they gave some milk to Prabhupada at night, and there was some extra, he gave me some extra milk, and I tasted it, I drank some of it, and I noticed it wasn't so sweet as we generally have in the ashram. It had less sugar in it, and of course I later heard, hear Prabhupada say on tape he had diabetes, so, but still he would just take his regular prashadam, and I remember also in the temple room, the old temple room, they put on a play. It was about Palambasura, and Prajapati was there, and they requested all the devotees, okay, right after the class, want everybody to exit the temple, because there's not much room. And so all the devotees were exiting, but I was thinking I want to stay here anyway, so I stayed, and I got chastised afterwards, but they put on Palambasura, and I remember Prajapati he took the part of Palambasura, so he was, like a normal cowherd boy, and I think it was Loy Taksha was there, and he was on riding his Balaram. So they went into the corner so Prajapati would put on his demon mask for the change, and he went like this, and he started losing his balance. And Srila Prabhupada started laughing. And he didn't completely fall over, and Prabhupada was laughing like that. And Srila Prabhupada's garden, it went through different stages. I didn't see all the different stages, but I used to work in the Bhaktivedanta archives, so I saw like, thousands of pictures of Srila Prabhupada and thousands of pictures of his garden. So I went through different stages. And the first stage I saw that it had a pond, dug a pond in the ground, and after that I believe there was a Tulsi house, some kind of a Tulsi house there, and the last renovation, which was done by Narayan, he got some from some fountain from Mexico, and they built in the middle like that, so that was the last improvement like that. And we also we decided to make it even nicer, because we were thinking Srila Prabhupada was going to come back. We were thinking it was going to come back in 1977. And he didn't come back. So we were trying to fix up the garden more, and so we made the wall higher to go all the way around, and the path that went to his garden behind the Vajaya room, that was like sand back there, so we decided to make it bricks. We put bricks back there, and like that. And I remember Srila Prabhupada, even though he was very sick here in Los Angeles, once he caught like a flu or something, and he was very sick, and he couldn't even give the class, but he would come anyway. And I think at least once Prajumna gave the class, and we were told, I heard later that they asked Prabhupada, "You're sick, Prabhupada, don't come." And he said, Yeah, if I don't come, the others will give an excuse not to come. And we had a Guru Puja. Well, Guru Puja started later on. When I first joined, we probably just come in, greet the deities, and sit on his Vyāsa-sani, and we just chant Jai Radha Madhava, and then have a kirtan at the end. So yeah, later on we introduced a Guru Puja, and we chanted, and I think it was Siddhama Maharaj, he started the first kirtan for that here in the temple. That was maybe in 73 or 74, like that. Okay? Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Haribo. Kriya Shakti Mataji, Haribo, Kriya.
I remember the first time that I saw Srila Prabhupada was here in Los Angeles, and I was sitting over there in that corner of the temple room, and he was giving class. We drove up from San Diego, some of the devotees, and I had heard Srila Prabhupada's lectures, of course, but it was the first time I had seen him in person like that. And there was such a welling in my heart that I didn't know where it came from, but I remember crying a lot the first time I saw Srila Prabhupada. There have been times in my life when there have been anxieties or questions or, I felt like I needed some encouragement. And Srila Prabhupada has come at different times in a dream, which I'm sure that some of us have experienced. And recently, I was feeling anxieties. And that night I had a dream of Srila Prabhupada, and I dreamt that I was coming to him with my anxieties. And I sat at his feet and express my anxieties, and he opened up his chadar like a cape for me to come inside and take shelter. So I feel like Srila Prabhupada is continuously encouraging and always there, and through his books, his words, and his personal presence. Dear Srila Prabhupada, you brought forth the rains of mercy to nourish my parched and sleeping soul, and from your mouth breathed the powerful and almighty holy names. I inhaled the words that gave me life, and like a leaf in the wind twirled and landed at your lotus feet. Then woke in my heart to sing your favorite hymn. You charted a course both steady and true through the minefield of material existence. And joy filled my once empty soul, for by now your touch had made me whole. Continuously you lead me on, chanting and dancing to live the life you gave me. Thank you, Srila Prabhupada, your grateful servant.
Would like to ask Jyotikarma Prabhu to speak now.
So I'm going to read an offering I wrote for this Prabhupada Tributes book from Srila Prabhupada's disciples. Dear Srila Prabhupada, please accept my humble obeisances, all glories to your divine grace on your appearance day. When you arrived in America on September 17th, 1965, in fulfillment of your Guru's order that you introduce Krishna consciousness to the West, I myself had returned to America after a 3-year stay in Germany, where my father had been stationed with the American military. Now in Florida, I was starting my final year of high school. I graduated in June of 1966, and in the fall of that year, I entered the George Washington University in Washington, D.C., in the School of International Affairs. I was 18 years old. Unknown to me, you were in New York City, where, motivated by selfless, pure love of Lord Krishna, you were manifesting the first elements of your International Society for Krishna Consciousness at a storefront temple on the Lower East Side, engaging whomever Krishna brought into your sublime association. In late 1966 and in 1967, I passed through New York City a few times, even visiting Greenwich Village and the Lower East Side, but I did not encounter you or your fledgling followers. In 1969, in Berkeley, as I was running down Telegraph Avenue with a crowd of young people chased by the police and National Guard who had broken up a huge anti-war protest at the university campus. My eyes burning with tear gas, I saw and heard a chanting party of Hare Krishna devotees, not really understanding who they were. Not long thereafter, I was sitting on a bench in a park in St. Petersburg, Florida, when I heard the same chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra. A small party of your students were strolling along one of the streets bordering the park. A girl in a sari was walking through, approaching people, distributing Back to Godhead magazine. She offered me one. I refused it. At that time, I did not want to have anything to do with counterfeit spirituality. I felt these Western people were just faking it, putting on some Indian clothes and thinking that they were spiritual. But eventually, in 1973, I did get caught in the loving network you had spread across first America and then the world. I received a copy of your Bhagavad Gita as it is from your disciples at a Grateful Dead concert in upstate New York. I took it home, read it, and following the invitation on the copyright page, wrote to the Bhaktivedanta Book Trust in Los Angeles. They sent me a catalog. I ordered more books, a subscription to Back to Godhead magazine, some posters of Krishna, and a subscription to your tape ministry. Hearing the sound of your strong voice, uncompromising yet compassionate, it's hard to read with tears in your eyes. Hearing your strong voice, uncompromising yet compassionate. In your transmission of the teachings of Lord Krishna and Lord Chaitanya, convinced me that your followers were not something counterfeit. Soon I joined your temple in Washington, D.C., and eventually in 1976, you accepted me as your disciple. The Chaitanya Charitamrita Adi Lila, chapter 7, text 35 through 37 says, quote, after accepting the renounced order, the sannyas order, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu attracted the attention of those who had evaded him, beginning with the logicians. Thus, the students, infidels, fruitive workers, and critics all came to surrender unto the lotus feet of the Lord. Lord Chaitanya excused them all, and they merged into the ocean of devotional service, for no one can escape the unique loving network of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And your purport to CC Adi 737, you say, quote, as an ideal acharya, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu devised ways to capture all kinds of atheists and materialists. Every acharya has a specific means of propagating his spiritual movement with the aim of bringing men to Krishna consciousness. Now that you have captured me, please do not let me go, hoping to remain your servant eternally, Druda Karma Das.
Haribol. So next is Jagajanani, Hare Krishna Mataji. But as predicted from historical reference, we have, it's now 10:30, we go to 11:45. That is 75 minutes, right? We have at least 10 devotees listed who want to speak. So do the math. That's a maximum of 7.5 minutes each. So please don't get upset if after 7 minutes I ask you to wrap it up, okay?
Dear Srila Prabhupada, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to you, Srila Prabhupada, for your deep compassion for all living beings. Your loving care and guidance are very dear to all. Srila Prabhupada, I cannot thank you enough or ever repay you for giving me this life in Krishna's service. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I am not able to fully grasp this priceless gift. I pray that I will become more and more determined to help your mission in every way I can. I am ever so grateful for the association of all your glorious devotees. I beg to become the servant of the servant of the servant. Your servant and daughter, Jagajanani Dasi.
Haribol. Jai Bhargava Prabhu, thank you. Can I have your copy of that?
Hi. I traveled a lot with Prabhupada because I had a gimmick, my camera, and I was working for ISKCON Press. I was lucky to join the Boston Temple where so many wonderful devotees were working on Prabhupada's books. So I'll give pastime because they're instructional. There was a woman who came to the New York Temple to do a freelance article on the devotees. She had a nice Nikon camera, which was state-of-the-art in those days. And what we had was, you know, people who donated their cameras. And they worked, you know. Later she wrote her article. And in it said, there was this one devotee, he was more interested in my camera than he was in me. So Jai Dwaita comes to me and he naturally accuses me. There were other devotees taking pictures, but he accuses me. So Jews and Catholics always carry guilt, even if there's nothing to be guilty about. So I felt bad, and we were in London, and we went on a walk with Prabhupada in St. James Park. And coming back, I said to Prabhupada, Prabhupada, sometimes I preach nicely, sometimes I don't. If the person's sincere, will they still come to Krishna? And Prabhupada said, yes. And he gave a multi-dimensional answer to my question. And the next layer was, he gave the simile about the pond. When the senses become agitated, the intelligence becomes covered. Just like in the pond, where this water becomes agitated, the mud comes up and covers the senses, so you can't see or anything if you're in muddy water. Then he went to the next dimension, and I was a strict brahmachari in those days. It wasn't really my nature, but I understood what Prabhupada was bringing to the world. I came from a Jewish background. My grandparents' families were wiped out in the Holocaust. I was going to be a history major, and I understood a lot of this crap was coming from bad religious teachings coming out of the Catholic Church. One pope told them, hey, you can conquer anywhere. If they're not Christians, you can take their land. Man, these are sick people. But Prabhupada was bringing something very, very beautiful. And I understood the value, and that's kept me brahmachari for all those years to try to help serve him. Anyway, getting back to the story, the multidimensional aspect of it, and he kind of saw into my future and understood I wasn't going to be a brahmachari later on in life. And he started telling me, he said, there's two kinds of cities. There's sadhan city, where someone follows all the rules and regulations of devotional service. And then he said, and by the mercy of Krishna, he may become perfect. It's not automatic. And then he said, sometimes someone is not able to follow all the rules and regulations of devotional service, but he has an overwhelming desire to perform some great service for Krishna. So by the mercy of Krishna, he may also become perfect. And then he gave a material example, the example, if anybody knows Indian history, the example of Clive of India. Clive came to India as a ship's cabin boy with the British East India Company. And he was very influential in bringing large parts of India under the control of the company. And for that, he was made a lord. And Prabhupada used this as a material example because he had done such great service. Of course, it's the British East India Company, the 1% of England that was ruining India and a lot of parts of the world. But he did great service, so he was rewarded materially. Anyway, Prabhupada, he thought differently. I give you a funny example. We got the deities from the Delhi Pandit, And they ended up in Prabhupada's room because they didn't have enough Brahmins to install the deities in Scotland. And they were beautiful deities. On the way to Krishna, that cover, Yadavara took that picture of profile of Krishna. And Prabhupada liked the way the deities were painted, like powder blue, you know. So they were sitting in a corner and he asked me to photograph him. He was getting massaged by Kulashekar around that time. And he asked me to photograph him. I just tried to photograph him in the dark corner there. He said, no, bring them out. And he wanted me and Kulashekar to move the deities. So, but I said, Prabhupada, I only have a first initiation. I'm not a Brahmin. He said, that's all right. You're half Brahmin. You can move them. See, he would adjust things. And then he was very hurt by, you know, the mismanagement. And he didn't mind telling the managers, you know, they were just his students. You know, he would get angry at them too. And we were on a walk in Mayapur and he said, I come to encourage and you come to discourage. And then one GBC had something on another GBC, he came to complain to Prabhupada. Prabhupada got really upset. We were on the roof of one of the buildings in Mumbai. And Prabhupada got really upset. And he said, I give them a little power and they say, do this, do this, do this. He said, no. He said, first you get them to love you, then they'll do whatever you want. And I'm looking at the devotee came to squeal and wondering, do you really understand what Prabhupada was talking about? Or is it just a new tool to exploit devotees or to manipulate devotees? So, but Prabhupada was pretty straightforward about stuff like that. He made GBC sit down in Paris. We were in this little room. And he said, if you don't follow, all you have is the trouble you went through to get the knowledge. And his arm went up, sleeve dropped down, and he had 3 watches on. So people would give Prabhupada watches all the time, and he wouldn't give the old watch away until he made sure the new watch worked. It was very practical, and probably one was India time, I guess. And there was some story, I think it was Guru Kripa, I'm not sure. Guru Kripa did great service. Kind of in the mood of a pirate, but a great pirate. And he and Yasodhananda brought a lot of respect to Prabhupada in South India because they knew Sanskrit. They really opened up South India with the Madhvas and the Sri Sampradaya. It was a story where Prabhupada was singing in his room. He didn't sing because he had to, he sung because he loved to. And Munibunda walked by, and he heard him singing. Munibunda had a state-of-the-art, your reel-to-reel tape recorder. Now it's Nakamichi, I guess. And he asked Prabhupada, can I record you? And Prabhupada agreed. We all went in the next evening. And Prabhupada sung really beautifully. And me and Yogeshwar were the last guys out, me snapping, and Yogeshwar affectionately said to Prabhupada, Prabhupada, you sing so beautifully. Prabhupada said, well, I do not sing beautifully. It's because you love me. You are thinking I'm singing beautifully. But he was singing beautifully. He had this melodic voice. And Jadharani asked me to ask Prabhupada some questions when I went to New Vrindavan for her. And one was, Prabhupada, do you read your letters before they go out? Because he had his servants type them, you know, and politics has always been there. Always probably will be until we die and go back to Godhead.
He signed his letters, and I was his secretary, and he read them before he signed his signature.
This was my experience with it. No. Those were your experience. This is what my experience was. So his answer was, he had letters on his desk, and he looked down and started reading them. That was his answer. And
anyway, Prabhu, time. Please wrap up.
Just one last one. Jadharani asked me to ask him if he was present in his pictures. And Prabhupada's answer was, if you think of me, then I am there. So it's still true now. All right. Dip, dip, dip. That's all, folks.
Hare Krishna. Mother Kadamba, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. I became a devotee here at this temple in 1973 in April when it was at the other other room over there. And Prabhupada was here actually, and I actually had no intention of being a devotee. I was just visiting my sister, and Prabhupada was here, and she would say, okay, just go listen to class, just go over there. So I was like, all right. So I would go listen to Prabhupada. I couldn't understand him, but I would sit there and listen to Prabhupada. And I think somehow or other, in fact, I was actually almost confrontational. I would be, because everyone would hit the ground when Prabhupada would come in for greeting of the deities, and I would just stand there like I didn't think anyone should bow down to anyone. So I just stood there and watched the whole pageantry. And I remember actually after a while, one day I was bowing down and I thought, what am I doing? What happened? So anyway, I had no intention of becoming a devotee. But anyway, as luck would have it. Anyway, this is and once they started this tributes, I thought every year, even if it's only a sentence, I'm going to make a tribute to Prabhupada. Dear Srila Prabhupada, thank you for directing me to Krishna in this lifetime. Believing in God is a blessing, but knowing who God is truly miraculous. No one definitively told us who exactly God is. How could we have known? But you explained simply in plain direct language of the revealed Vedic scriptures, which you brought to the West. Your purports unlock so many mysteries of both the material and spiritual energy, and even of our identity. Thank you for giving us such a treasure, and for being the via medium through which we can offer service to Lord Krishna. Without you, I'm afraid we would be lost, and we were lost. But you brought us the message of Lord Chaitanya and the Parampara, the chain by which we can link to Krishna. You carried the message of Krishna to us without any adulterations, and you did it for us for the sole reason of giving us a chance to be saved from the cycle of birth and death. I continue to try to serve you and your ISKCON mission, although my efforts are full of discrepancies. But I know that you are merciful as Krishna is merciful. Please allow me to serve the mission of your ISKCON and to stay in your service and in the presence of your wonderful disciples and grand disciples, despite my inadequacies. I pray someday to be worthy of the gifts you have brought to us. Thank you forever. We are all in your debt. Your grateful disciple, Kadamba Devi Dasi.
Haribo. Burgapati Prabhu.
Bye.
Before he starts, if there are any other senior ladies that I have not yet approached who would like to speak, just raise your hand or indicate somehow. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. So we're hearing so many beautiful stories this morning about the extraordinary mercy of Srila Prabhupada. And I'm another example of that. Before coming to the movement, I was a bona fide degenerate. I'll spare you the details. And Srila Prabhupada's mercy cut me off at the pass. Within a period of a few months, in the beginning of 1973, I came in contact with devotees on the streets of New York 5 different times, and each time I received literature from them, which I read and was very impressed by. And then finally, the last devotee I met invited me to come to the temple, and which I did. I went, and when I went to the temple, I was really impressed by how friendly the devotees were, and how kind they were, and how encouraging they were. So I just take that as Prabhupada plucking me out of the material world. Like we heard this morning how Krishna is non-different from his name. And my understanding is Prabhupada's non-different from his books. Prabhupada's non-different from his movement. If you think that's too much of a stretch, I'll try to make that point in another way. In the 4th canto, there's one purport where Prabhupada says that the pure devotee is always thinking about how to spread the spread the Krishna conscious movement. And Krishna, being pleased by that attitude, he enlightens the general populace from within by his causeless mercy. So, yeah, I think that's what happened. Prabhupada was so sincere that Krishna just plucked some not necessarily qualified people right out of the material world to assist him. Bhajan Narayan Maharaj in his class yesterday morning referred to this one anecdote where Prabhupada was on a morning walk with some devotees, and one devotee started quoting this verse from the Bhagavad Gita, 7th chapter, text 28, Yesham Tvantakatam Papam, that only those who have acted piously in this lifetime and in previous lifetimes can engage in my devotional service with firm determination. So Prabhupada cut him off before he could even finish the translation, and he said, actually, I have created your good fortune. So I can really relate to that, as I said, because, I know I was on a collision course with disaster, and, Prabhupada, as I said, through his books and his movement, just cut me off at the pass and, brought me to Krishna consciousness. And there's one letter Prabhupada wrote to, actually, Siddhama, and in it he said that when I was alone in New York, I was thinking, who will listen to me in this horrible, sinful place? But at least I can write a few of my books. That is something. He said, but then Krishna did something that I could not see. He sent you young boys and girls to me one by one for doing the work of Lord Chaitanya. Now I could see it as a miracle. So Prabhupada himself saw it like that. He forced Krishna's hand. Prabhupada was so sincere that, Krishna had to give him a movement. Krishna's looking around going, wait a second, people like that don't get to become devotees. Certainly somebody like me doesn't get to become a devotee. But Prabhupada was so sincere about, executing the instruction of his spiritual master that he kind of like forced Krishna's hand. He had to reciprocate. And at least that's how I understand how I came to Krishna consciousness. So I'm very grateful to Prabhupada because really, honestly, I feel he saved my life. I don't think I'd be alive even if it wasn't for, Prabhupada coming into my life in the form of his books and his movement. And what to speak of having an opportunity to engage in devotional service and try to make some progress spiritually. And so I pray that I'm allowed to continue to be part of the Krishna conscious movement, to continue to participate in the Krishna conscious movement for the rest of this life and after. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Haribol. So, Siddhanta Prabhu.
Timarandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakchulum Hamjana Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. There's a purport from the Srimad Bhagavatam 4th Canto 12th chapter 45th verse, wherein it stated, if anyone hears about the activities of the Lord's devotee, then he or she can achieve all their desired goals of life. So with that in mind, I will tell you some of the activities and qualities of Srila Prabhupada that hopefully we can remember and achieve the desired goals of our life, which hopefully is to go back to Godhead. So recently, 2 months ago, or maybe a month ago, I went back east and interviewed Ravindra Swarup Prabhu in New York. And this is a story which tells us an example of Srila Prabhupada's wit and humor. A lot of new devotees think Prabhupada's very grave, which he is, but he's a person. He has so many aspects to his personality, and one of them is his great sense of humor. So in Dallas, Rabindra Swarup had sent his child there, Lalita Madhava, and at that time she was maybe 6 or 7 years old. And the Gurukula teachers brought the students up in front of Prabhupada to have his association, and Lalita Madhava was in front of Prabhupada, and she had these bangles. You know, children have a lot of bangles, like women do also. And Prabhupada saw that and said, "Oh, you like these bangles? You like this in your culture? You appreciate bangles?" And she said, "Yes." Then Prabhupada said to Rabindra Swarup, "You should marry her to a Kshatriya." Then her teacher, who was there, said to Lalita Madhava, "Oh, chant some verses for Prabhupada." They were training the students up in memorizing Bhagavad Gita verses. And she chants 4 or 5 verses from the Gita perfectly. And Prabhupada said, "Oh, better make that a Brahmana." So, very enlightening, and realization that Prabhupada was very, very witty. There was a Sankirtan class in Atlanta, Georgia, a darshan that Prabhupada had with the Sankirtan devotees there. One devotee asked Prabhupada, "Prabhupada, if I'm distributing your books and if I die on Sankirtan, will I go back to Godhead?" Srila Prabhupada said, "Well, if you think of Krishna at the time of death, then you'll go back home, back to Godhead." And everyone that was in that darshan kind of like, oh, kind of like lamenting that this is a huge task to achieve. And they were hoping for another answer. Prabhupada saw that dejection on their part and said, "But I promise you this, if you distribute my books every day for the rest of your life, I guarantee Lord Chaitanya himself will come down and take you back home, back to Godhead." We have a very nice devotee, Peter Burwash, and I beg for his forgiveness for mentioning his name. He told me not to mention it because of his affiliation with the business community. But Peter is a great disciple of Prabhupada. There was a time in Hawaii when he decided to give money, I think it was over $2,000, to become a life member, wherein you get all of Prabhupada's books, all of his future books. You get a card that says that you can stay in any ISKCON temple for 3 days, no charge. Many perks that went along with your donation of $2,200. I forget the exact amount, but it was a lot of money, at least back in those days. And he gave that money to the temple president. Next day, the temple president took that money and blooped. He never gave Peter his books or his official card to reside at a temple anywhere in the world in ISKCON. And Peter was a little upset, to say the least. So at that time in Hawaii, Prabhupada was there. Peter went into Prabhupada's room and started complaining. "Srila Prabhupada, the temple president took my money and he blooped, and now I can't get your books. I don't have an access to all the ISKCON temples." And he was complaining on and on and on, expressing his frustration. Srila Prabhupada waited for him to finish, and he said to Peter, "Do not be upset with the instrument of your karma." So we can take this as a learning lesson for ourselves, that next time we get stopped by the police for speeding, it's not really his fault, but our karma is coming to get us for whatever that situation is where we're venting and blaming someone else for our troubles. Bhanabhata Prabhu was a temple commander in Mayapur. He had just become the temple commander there. And it was about a week or two before the huge group of devotees from America, from Europe were going to come. And there were some devotees there already there in Mayapur along with him. So every morning after breakfast prasadam, he would ask many devotees to come help and do some service, to get the grounds ready, to get the rooms ready, because it would have been a huge task to do it with one or two people. So every morning he would ask this one particular devotee. He was from America, African-American body, very strong, able-bodied individual. And Bhanabhata would say, Prabhu, can you help do some service? We have a lot of devotees coming, and we need your help to do some service to get all the grounds together, the rooms together. And the devotee said, no, I just came here to chant Hare Krishna. And Bhanabhata was, and he would go off into the forest and chant Hare Krishna all day long. This happened 3 or 4 days in a row, and the devotee refused to do any service. All he wanted to do was chant. So Bhanabhata, being the temple commander, he had access to Srila Prabhupada's room. He was, I'll try to imitate how Bhanabhata explained it to me.
Prabhupada, time.
That's time? Okay, let me finish the story then. So Bhanabhata goes into Prabhupada's room. Prabhupada is chanting Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. And Bhanabhata says, Srila Prabhupada, after he pays his obeisance, says, Srila Prabhupada, this devotee, I have a problem. I need to ask you how to solve this. This devotee will not do any service. I ask him, we have so many devotees coming, and I ask him to do some service around the temple so we can get prepared for all these devotees. And all he does is go off and chant Hare Krishna. He won't do any service. As soon as he said that, Prabhupada looked at him and said, oh, you think chanting Hare Krishna is not service? And Prabhupada opened his eyes wide and said, it is the greatest service. And Bhanabhata said, yes, Srila Prabhupada. And he said he felt like an ant and crawled out backwards. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Hare Krishna. So next is Ranadeer Prabhu. Weren't you Kangsa last night? You should pick that up with one finger. Come on.
Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Vastaya Bhutale Srimad Bhaktivedanta Shamini Tinamani Namaste Saraswati Deve Gaudavani Prachadine Nirvisesha Sunyavadi Paschacha De Satarane. I'll read my canned speech here and maybe tell you a story. Please accept my humble obeisances at your lotus feet. I pray to someday desire to take their shelter. You are not and are not of this world. When you were here, you manifested talents unmatched by anyone else on this planet. You were and are far beyond compare, able to read people's minds, to masterfully write so many magnificent volumes of transcendental knowledge, and sowed the seeds of Krishna consciousness all over the world. Your compassion for the fallen souls knew no limits, and you worked tirelessly to free them from the shackles of material bondage. Your mercy knows no bounds. You accepted even a wretch like me into your flock and encouraged me in my service. I was so very fortunate to have your personal association on several occasions, and despite 2 strokes that resulted in some loss of memory, I can vividly recall and cherish each time we were together. How I came by such good fortune remains a complete mystery to me. I was a New York heroin addict on the methadone program when, in 1968, at the age of 24, I moved to the New Vrindavan Farm community. By your mercy alone, I was able to give up my drug addiction and became your initiated disciple. You allowed me to be of service at New Vrindavan, then helped start the Pittsburgh Temple, and then later become a part of your New Dwarka community in Los Angeles. In spite of my many heinous offenses, you remain my guardian, my guiding light. I am still astonished by the astounding words in your books, and I cling to the hope that I may one day take birth in a body that can truly understand and appreciate those amazing words. Today, I can only pray that in this body's decline, I will forget neither you nor your beloved Krishna. And I just wanted to say thank you so much for the welcome that we received from this community. And the memories that devotees shared with me that I have forgotten. I was scared to come down, to be honest, and I didn't know what I was going to say to anybody, or how it would play out. And everybody has been so kind, and I can remember the association of devotees, which was so important to me. I didn't have much association with Prabhupada, but I had a lot of association with his devotees, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate that. I'm so grateful for that. Thank you.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhu. So next is Puri Das. One note about crying. Prabhupada said once that these Mayavadis, they criticize the devotees for crying, but he said they don't understand. Lord Chaitanya was simply crying.
Hare Krishna. All glories to Srila Prabhupada, all glories to assembled devotees, exalted devotees. My name is Puri Das. I became a disciple of Srila Prabhupada in 1973 in Edinburgh, Scotland. And the year before that, in 1972, I was still living with my parents. I was still attending school. So I was like a folk member, and I used to come up to temple and do seva service, and just happily go along, kind of behind the back of my parents. They didn't know what I was doing. And so there's a lot of buzz, a lot of excitement in the temple that Srila Prabhupada was coming. And I heard so much about him from the devotees. And I said, I have to see him. I have to see what he looks like, and heard so much about him. So because I was still living at home, I did manage to see him in Edinburgh. But I jumped in the van with the devotees, and I went to the nearby city in Glasgow. And it was Woodside Hall. I could be wrong, but I think Bhargava was there. And so, because in Edinburgh, it wasn't so much action there. Everything was down south in London. That's where a lot of the congregation was, and the temple there. So just to the fact that Prabhupada had come up to Scotland was something. But he did have a little affection for Scotland. I believe I'm right, that in his young days, he was studying at a Scottish college in Calcutta. So he had a little affection. Yeah. And so he had a little affection for Scotland. Yeah. And so we were all excited, and we all got there, of course, before Srila Prabhupada, all chanting outside the hall. And then Srila Prabhupada showed up. Tribhuvanatha, I don't know if anyone knows him. He was very famous for his nice smile and the way he used to dance. So in those early days in Scotland, it was very, very hard to make devotees. The Scottish people were so set in their materialistic ways. So Tribhuvanatha kind of to want to show off to Srila Prabhupada that
oh, Srila Prabhupada, this is our new devotees. So there was 4 of us. Well, of course, there was many devotees, but 4 new Scottish devotees. So we all, as Prabhupada came out of the car, we paid our obeisances, and Prabhupada saw, and he touched 4 of our heads. And he says, you're liking this Krishna consciousness movement? And so in the Woodside Hall itself, it was a very, very big raised platform. And they actually took the Vyāsa-san from the Edinburgh Temple. It was a funny old kind of chair thing. And so Prabhupada was on the Vyāsa-san. All the devotees were up there. And it was just so ecstatic to see. But as you look around, you see all the karmis, and you think, whoa, it's like one contrast from the other. Then, so I have another little pastime. A few years later, I was living in the Paris temple, and I built up a big desire to go to India, because I had heard so much nectar of devotees coming back from India and all the stories, and of course reading the scriptures. And Bhagawan, he was our GBC there, so I'm always kind of indebted to Bhagawan, because for 2 reasons. He paid half my fare to go to India. And the number 1 reason, he allowed me to present the first Krishna book in the French language to Srila Prabhupada. So that I'm always indebted to Bhagawan. And so, all right, so I took the book with me, and it was like guarding the crown jewel. That book did not leave me at any time. And I arrived in Delhi. Tejas was the temple president. I was bothering him. When can I go up to Vrindavan? I have to give this the book to Srila Prabhupada on, as he said, well, we're going tomorrow. There's a van going up. In fact, the first Guru Coolies are going up there, and you can ride with Dwarkadish, Rupa Vilas, and one of the 2, the first Guru Coolies. So you'll go in that van. So the next day came, I was getting excited. So I rode in the van up to Vrindavan, and I told the temple commander that I was here for this. And finally, I got in the room. Hari Soy was there. He was the secretary, and Prabhupada was talking to an American student. And Hari Soy kind of informed what I was here for, and blah, blah, blah. And he says, what is your name? I told him my name. And so he says, you have something for me? And yes, Srila Prabhupada, I gave him the French Krishna book. And so he looked, and he was just so engrossed in the book. And so every time when he looked, he showed everybody the picture. And I always remember the expressions on his face. He went, like this. So then he would look, and he had another picture, and show it to everybody in the room, and go, So the following year, I was living in Vrindavan, and I guess I didn't realize how fortunate I was. So I was just a little naive brahmachari, and at night, I used to hang out with my other brahmachari friends, and we used to have a competition over hot milk at night, and we used to get back to each other and see the different places that we saw Srila Prabhupada, and then we'd talk, and they'd say, well, I saw Srila Prabhupada here, I saw him there. So, well, I got to fan Srila Prabhupada today, and I was walking by chanting, but I saw him through the window. And sometimes we were kind of very naughty brahmacharis. We'd go up on the guest house roof, and we look down, and we see Srila Prabhupada being massaged with Pendra. There was Pradumna there, small Krishna. So we like spying kind of down. So we used to come back at night and tell those little stories where we saw Srila Prabhupada. Just a few pastimes I thought I'd share with you. Hare Krishna.
Haribol, Naikat, Prabhu.
Nama Om Vishnu Bharai Krishna Padastabhadale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Nityanami Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Bacharani Nivishesha Shunyavadi Pastachari Satarni. Thank you, Srila Prabhupada. Thank you, Vaishnava Prabhus, for being here. I had written I started writing something yesterday, but after about the first few sentences or paragraph, I started getting sort of a brain fog and actually started getting a headache because I think inside myself I was thinking I'm going to write something cute and intelligent. And that wasn't the fact. I knew it was very insincere, whatever I would write. But, so I just wanted to come and listen to all the Prabhus and what they were sharing. Because for me, that is a great inspiration to see how Srila Prabhupada has touched so many devotees' hearts. And it brings different memories to mind when I had a little experience. There was a mention of 55th Street when I was there in 55th when we first got the building under Tamal Krishna Maharaj, and Prabhupada would go up to the roof, and I remember going up to the roof there and watching him in his darshans, and Prabhupada looked so regal, and it was such a wonderful sight to see in his new New York building. And then in evening, there was a very nice presentation by the drama group. And there was a mention of Srila Prabhupada's tuft of hair, which was really remarkable. I got to sit right behind Srila Prabhupada as he was watching the drama. And Prabhupada especially liked one actor, and there was a mention also of him, Sudama Maharaj. He especially liked the part where Sudama Maharaj was acting as Kali, and as he was dancing. Prabhupada really was fascinated by that, and he just laughed at it, and it was so fun to sit behind him and have him enjoy that. There was also another mention of Prasadam, and Rabindranath Prabhu was mentioning orange rinds. When we went to San Francisco Rath Yatra in 74, the temple was still there in Valencia, and after class, Srila Prabhupada had a plate of prasadam, and so that prasadam was to be distributed. And I was thinking in the back of my mind, my gosh, I would really love to get something. And but as it is in those days, all the senior Prabhus, all the sannyasis, Guru Kripa, and this one and that one were all there, and they just devoured it. But there was one thing left on the plate, and nobody touched it. And it was an orange rind that Prabhupada had actually tasted. So that was the perfection of that festival. So I greatly appreciate all of these wonderful experiences because it brings up a lot of wonderful remembrances in my mind. And I just pray that I can be in the association of the Vaishnavas as Srila Prabhupada's servants. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Naikama Prabhu. Jai Jagadish.
So many exalted souls. I am blessed to be in your association. Thank you very much. Dear Srila Prabhupada, please accept my unworthy obeisances at your lotus feet on this, the 125th anniversary of your divine appearance. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada, when you were present with us, you exhibited extraordinary grace in ordinary dealings. Your exemplary behavior was an exquisite manifestation of your exalted consciousness. You inhabited your physical body with ease and joy because you fully understood the difference between your external body and your true inner self. This, despite what your assistant, Harishori Prabhu, said, that he never saw you in good health. You were always suffering from one malady or another. On the other hand, because we conditioned souls take the body to be the self, and because we're filled with material motives and desires, our body becomes a bewildering, painful abode. Srila Prabhupada, as an eternally liberated soul, you have always experienced full, ever-expanding consciousness, whether you inhabited an external body or not. And when you did inhabit a physical body, you respected it and cared for it as a valuable vehicle with which to render invaluable service to Krishna in the material sphere. Those of us who identify with our body are always in a state of fear. On some level, we're always expecting danger. We know that our body will die one day. We just don't know when. Our ever-present fear means that we're never fully present. In the same way that someone who occupies a building that may burn down at any moment cannot be at peace in that building. Which brings us to a paradox. The only way to be fully present in a physical body is to not identify with it. If we identify with our body, we become enslaved by the modes of material nature which cover our consciousness and blunt our self-expression. We're always hankering for something we don't have and lamenting something we've lost. But you were fully present in your external body, and this allowed you to perform wondrous deeds. On the macro level, you turned mlechas into Vaishnavas, the lowest into the highest. You presented the essence of the Vedas in innumerable modern languages. And you implanted the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra into human society everywhere. On a micro level, you used your time wisely and efficiently. Your movements were graceful and deliberate, and you were always fearless and joyful. You remained unaffected by bodily disturbances such as illness, heat and cold, and hunger. As you expressed in one of your Bhaktivedanta purports, the pure devotee is always eager to use 100% of the energy in his body to serve Krishna. You were 100% immersed in your eternal pastimes with Lord Krishna, and at the same time you were 100% present in this world, which to me is unfathomable and miraculous. Some people have great impact on the world, but their character is flawed or abrasive. Some people are superficially nice, but have little impact on the world. Few indeed are those who accomplish great things and do so with pristine character. Srila Prabhupada, you epitomized such a person, for you taught us how to impart the greatest benefit to the world at large and at the same time act in selflessness and purity. For the remainder of my life, Srila Prabhupada, I shall always thank you for the gifts you have bestowed upon us all. All glories to you, Srila Prabhupada, on this, the 125th anniversary of your divine appearance, your aspiring servant, Jaya Jagadisha Das. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Maheshwar Prabhu, speak next.
Namam Vishnu Vidaya Krishna Vistaya Bhutlade Shimanti Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devan Gaudavani Pacharane Nivashesha Sunyavati Prashkata Deshatarane So every year at Prabhupada's appearance day, I find myself naturally thinking, where would I be today if I hadn't bumped into Prabhupada somewhere in the past? And I think all of us, if we take a minute to think of that, at least for me, I don't really want to think about it too much. I was a terror in high school in terms of I didn't do very well. I tormented my mother with my grades. I was getting in all sorts of mischief. And I was told, you just got to keep in school, stay in school, stay in school. And of course, after high school, it was like, well, now you got to go to college. And the thing is, I didn't find any value in any of it. I had to read books like Jane Eyre and Wuthering Heights, and I just couldn't find any reason to read those books. And so I was actually really pretty bad academically. I liked tinkering and taking things apart and asking questions, but every time I asked questions, and I'd go to different places, like church, whatever it was, Buddhist meditations, New Age groups, and I just never felt that the answers were there. So anyhow, eventually convinced my parents, believe it or not, to let me drop out of college for a year after my second year. And my relationship with Prabhupada is extremely mystical because I didn't really know exactly what it was going to do, but I knew I had to do it. And I knew I had to do it someplace other than where I was at the time, which was at the University of Kansas in the middle of the country. So I got together with friends and I went to Europe and traveled all over the place, got a Euro pass, and somehow ended up in Paris and came around the corner and ran right into the Harinam Sankirtan party, which actually I'd run into them in New York several years earlier in high school, coming out of the Biltmore Theater after watching the play Hair, which actually had the devotees in it. And I didn't have my glasses at the time, and they were way down the street, and I couldn't really see, but they all looked like saffron. And I asked a friend of mine when I heard the sounds, I said, "What is that?" And he said, "They're Buddhists." But I didn't quite hear him properly, and what I heard was, "They're nudists." So I went, okay, we're getting out of here fast. So anyhow, I went to the Paris temple with my friends, two college friends. And if you're familiar with the old Paris temple, it was on that strange corner. They had a little tiny elevator, and somehow I got separated. And my very first contact actually listening to anything Krishna conscious was extremely, like we say, you don't have to understand the words, but if you're paying attention, the meaning will go through. And I was just basically opened the door and found myself sitting in the Paris temple room, and somebody was giving a lecture. And everybody was sitting around just like we're sitting here now. And I didn't understand a word of it because I don't speak French. But I was sitting there and I was observing how, just like now, everybody was paying attention. It was a Sunday class, I think. It was a Sunday feast, actually. And I was observing very carefully, and I was going, I don't know what's going on here, but it's got my attention. And eventually, that was 1973, the Max 72 Bhagavad Gita had just come out. They handed it, it went through. I'm really shortening this down because I only have a few minutes, but they handed me on the way out, they actually gave, I had read the Bhagavad Gita before. It was little tiny penguins, like practically paper thin, because I knew there was something there, but it was totally disappointed by it. And the devotee explained to me, he read the wrong one. And somehow I understood that. Of course, I was traveling out of a backpack, and then he handed me this Bhagavad Gita that looked like a brick, and I was going, there's no way I'm putting that in my backpack. So anyhow, but I promised him I'd get it when I came back to the United States. And one of the mystical things was, because it was printed by Macmillan, it was actually at the University of Kansas bookstore, because I was 300 miles away from any temple. And I walked in, and sure enough, there was one sitting there. I picked it up, read it, started reading it. Took me a long time because I hated to read, but I found that as I was reading Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita, I started realizing actually I like to read, because now I found something worth reading. And then, of course, the big anxiety that came up was, wait a minute, what am I doing in this college? I ought to be a devotee. And the big anxiety was, how in the heck am I going to, because my parents were like, yeah, you got to do the 4 years of college. And I had only gotten through about 3 of them, and I'm going, I am that back then the mood was college is a waste of time. So I was praying very, very, just in anxiety, Krishna, you got to do something. You got to do something. I don't know how to do this. I can't do it on my own. You got to do something. And then sure enough, after about 3 or 4 months, I got a phone call from Budara, who was one of the lead men on the Radha Damodar traveling Sankirtan party. And the next thing I know, I had 30 devotees basically knocking on my door. They were doing programs all over the University of Kansas. I participated with them, not realizing at the time that I was probably not going to go back to school. I thought I would just help them out and go back to school. And halfway through that whole experience, I realized, wait a minute, I've been praying for something like this to happen, and now it's happening. And what am I going to do? I'm just going to go back to school? And, it's just sort of like I was kicking myself in the head, and Christian kind of tricked me, and I realized I can't go back to school. I just skipped classes for a week. And at that time, the devotees could sort of see what was going on, and they started coming around and saying, well, before we leave, we can use a few things. We could use a few pots. Can you help us out? We can use some of your clothes for the Sankirtan. Can you help? We can use some of your tools. And they went through everything in my apartment, and then they kind of stood at me, and I kind of looked at them, and they looked at me, and they said, there's one last thing we need. And it was me. I mean, it chokes me up because it was like, it just happened. It just happened. And I jumped on the bus, and that's how I became a devotee. And I want to thank Prabhupada, because when I think about where I'd be today, I live in Ojai. I meet a lot of very, very strange people who believe a real lot of very strange things. And I would probably be a pretty hardcore atheist, because nothing else really makes any sense. But Krishna consciousness beats it all. So thank you all.
Hi, thank you, Manisha. Ruja Dev, Prabhu. Just be back by 11:45 for the pushback.
I really wasn't planning on saying anything today, but Archita Prabhu thought it would be worthwhile, urged me to give my experiences of how I came to Krishna consciousness. So, all right, I was a real long-haired hippie just traveling around, and I left Detroit, Michigan, and just took I think I was hitchhiking at the time down to Florida. So there I met some Matajis from the Florida temple who are on Sankirtan, and somehow at that time it was one part of the lines was anyway, it just all came together. She showed me the Krishna book, and she said, George Harrison, George Harrison is really into this. And I said, oh yeah, I wasn't interested at all, but then she said that, and so I opened it up and I saw George Harrison's intro, and so I said, George Harrison's into it. So then I said, all right, I'll take the book. And I don't know if I gave any donation even, or actually I don't think I had any money, but maybe I gave something. But anyway, she gave me the book, and so that was my first time. I was reading Krishna book, and I was such an idiot. I was just a big meat eater and smoking, not too much drugs, but smoking and drinking every day. So I was just reading the stories in Krishna book and kind of laughing, these are funny. But anyway, I got tricked, and so I don't think I'm the only one that had this experience, but it was kind of unique because she invited me to come to the Miami temple and gave me the address, showed me the address in the magazine, and so I said, all right, I'll do that. So I went to visit, and it was they were just getting ready to move out of the Dhruta Karma. Will remember he was there. He was a bhakta when I came, and they were just getting ready to move out of Coconut Grove into Coral Way Temple, which became New Naimisharanya. So I came there, and I just took some prasadam, and it might have been a Sunday feast, and then I just stayed. I didn't leave. I didn't go back. I just stayed, and I never left. So I had never visited a temple and never been inside a temple, but I came and I said, okay, yeah, I'd like to stay here, and they let me stay. So the only time I really saw Prabhupada was at the 76 New York Rath Yatra, which was a real special time. Jayananda was there, and so the first time I saw Srila Prabhupada was actually we were at the Rath site getting the carts prepared. I think it was the day before Rath Yatra, and they asked for some devotees because they were pulling Balaram's cart up a slope at the site, and they asked some devotees to hold Balaram's cart, so make sure it didn't slide back down the slope. And so I was one of those devotees holding the cart, and then I think it was Rameshwar Prabhu said, Prabhupada's coming. So that was really, we were all excited, and then so this big limousine, either dark blue or black Lincoln, not limousine, but Lincoln pulled around, and I looked in the back seat, and Prabhupada was sitting there, and had tilak and gopi chandan on his forehead, and I was thinking, oh man, he looks just like his photographs, and that was my first reaction. And then just like Rameshwar mentioned the other day, devotees, everyone has an experience where Prabhupada was just looking at them, and that's exactly what happened there. But it wasn't any prolonged thing where I would started crying or anything. It was just a momentary, just a split second. Prabhupada, from the back seat of the Lincoln, he just looked at all the devotees who were standing there, and just for one split second, I was looking directly at Srila Prabhupada, and I never forget that. But and the other thing that hit me at the time was I was thinking, because I had to hold the cart and make sure the cart wasn't sliding, so I couldn't offer obeisances. I couldn't even fold it with folded hands because I was holding it with two hands. So I was thinking, here is the first time I'm seeing my spiritual master, Srila Prabhupada, and I can't even offer obeisances. So I was like that. I was feeling a little. Just had that thought, but it was so nice, and then Prabhupada gave a class from the Chaitanya Charitamrita in the New York Temple the next day, and that was my experience. And that was also a special experience, seeing Prabhupada sitting on the Vyāsa sign and actually giving the class. And so many times I'd heard his lectures and I could hear him speak or see a video, but now I was in the same temple room where he was sitting on a Vyāsa sign and speaking, and so it was a short class, but it was so nice. So that's my recollections, and just so grateful that somehow I got tricked by Śrīla.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Ruchirdev Prabhu. If there are any proper disciples, male or female, who declined earlier or just came in who I haven't noticed, who would like to say something, please come forward. Anybody? Hare Krishna? Yeah, no. That's why I'm asking first. If there's any proper disciple, male or female, who just came or declined earlier to speak but now changed their mind, now is your chance. If not, I will try to wrap up. Say a few minutes. The Pushpanjali will start at actually, if we start a little earlier, it's better. That way we get it done in time for the RT. So, going once, going twice. Anybody who did not speak, who would like to speak? Hare Krishna. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pacharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschachadeshtarine Om Agyana Tamirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. So this morning's lecture was from the first canto, 8th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam. And after class, Bhajan Narayan Maharaj asked me, who selected that? So just for expedience sake, I told him myself. But actually, like everything else in Krishna consciousness, it was a group effort. Rameshwar Prabhu was staying with me, so I asked him yesterday, what would you recommend for a proper lecture for tomorrow? And he said, well, you know, he spoke so potently on the prayers of Queen Kunti that it was made into a book. He said, why don't you select something from there? So I said, okay. So then normally for the Sunday lectures, Jagadeeshananda has the collection of audio, and I usually kind of suggest something and then he selects a lecture to go along. So I contacted Jagadish. I said, hey, we're going to do a Prabhupada class tomorrow, and we would like to have something from the prayers of Queen Kunti. So he said, well, which verse do you want? I said, you know, they're all high quality audio, and of course the content is out of this world. So why don't you select something? But in the back of my mind, I was thinking of this verse. Vipadak shantatak satva tatra tatra jagadguru bhavatak darshana yaksya apunar bhava darshanam. So Prabhupada, as you heard in the lecture this morning, was stressing that last line. Not punar bhava, which means birth and death. We don't want to come back, or we should not want to come back to this material world. Anybody who's intelligent, you don't have to be even very intelligent to see what's going on in the world on a day-to-day basis. It is all hellish. Afghanistan, what people are going through there. So desperate, they're clinging to an airplane while it's taking off, falling to their deaths. So desperate. COVID-19. Everywhere we look. So Prabhupada was pointing out this morning, this is not a nice place. Don't try to stay here. Don't try to stay here. Take advantage of this boat of Krishna consciousness and go back to the spiritual world. So as a young college student, just finished my 3rd year of engineering, walking down the street, J Street, Brooklyn, New York, I see a saffron-clad devotee sitting at a book table. And now I've been very much into music, all kinds of music, from rock and roll to classic. I liked all kinds of music. But there was one band at the time that the name just resonated in my head, because it just, that phrase, there was a band called Chick Corea and Return to Forever. So that phrase stuck in my head, return to forever. First of all, return, you know, that means you came from there. You can't return to some place if you've never been there. And forever first. So then when I met this person who turned out to be Devamrita Das Brahmachari, who is now Devamrita Swami, so I got that one book, Krishna, the Reservoir of Pleasure. That little pamphlet is so potent. And the BBT should always keep it in print. We have other small pamphlets that we send out. Unchanting Hare Krishna is one of them. But that pamphlet, Krishna, the Reservoir of Pleasure, so potent. The very first line in that pamphlet grabbed me. Prabhupada grabbed me. This is Prabhupada. It's not somebody didn't just write this as a bridge book. This was Prabhupada directly. Krishna, that name is transcendental. Krishna means the highest pleasure. Every one of us is looking for pleasure, but we don't know where to look. So this is Srila Prabhupada. He came here, 1965, to tell us where to find real pleasure. We're by nature pleasure seeking. And he was stressing that again in this morning's lecture. But we keep running into nothing but distress. And we make excuses. Like, you know, every cloud has a silver lining. You know, you have to take the good with the bad, etc. Maharaj was pointing that out in his class. But no, we don't have to take any bad with the good if we go back to home, back to Godhead. So as the years go by, I'll be 69 in October. Srila Prabhupada picked me up when I was 21 years old. It just becomes more and more clear to me that we have to focus on that fact, that the spiritual world is Vaikuntha. There is no misery there. There's nothing bad to avoid. There are no bad people that you have to somehow or other deal with. It's all perfect and becoming more and more perfect. Srila Prabhupada said once, just as if somebody drops you off a boat in the middle of the ocean, you could never swim to the end of it. There's just no chance, no matter how strong a swimmer you are. So similarly, there's no end to perfection. It's not that you get to a point and then, okay, that's it. You can just become more perfect, more perfect, more perfect. More in love with Krishna, more in love with Krishna, more in love with Krishna. That's the spiritual world. Everything is always expanding. Here in the material world, things are always declining. Even when things seem like they're getting better, it just means more and more entanglement. Right? Because better means more money, more prestige, more opportunities for sense gratification. But all of that means more and more entanglement. As Prabhupada was saying this morning, what is the use of a few short years or a few decades living in comfort and so-called material happiness if the next life you're going to be a dog or a cat or a mouse? What's the use? And that's exactly what our past was and what our future would be if we had not come in contact with Srila Prabhupada. I remind myself of that all the time. I was born in 1952. That was the year that Prabhupada started his... Please turn the phones off. That was the year Prabhupada started his transition to a renounced life. He did not take sannyas yet, but he began his transition to renunciation, a life of renunciation. I mean, he was always renounced, he's a pure devotee, but formal renunciation from family, etc. began in 52. So I always wonder, I mean, like, why did I get the opportunity and not others? Why do some who come in contact with Krishna consciousness take it and others not? Because just by being related to me, my family members came in contact with Krishna consciousness at that time, 1973 in New York, but they didn't take it. As a matter of fact, they tried their best to get me out of it. So why is it, what is it that causes some of us to come in contact with Krishna consciousness and take it, and others not? So that's always been something that I wondered about. But Prabhupada reminded us that we are simply, on Lord Chaitanya's order, planting seeds. And those seeds will fructify. Quite often people say, you've distributed so many millions of books. Rameshwar can give you the exact number from his head. 1 million soft Gitas, when we had to do that at Bridge Gita, we did 1 million of those at Kingsport Press. 1 million BTGs a month were coming out for quite some time. So a lot of books are out there. Millions of Prabhupada's books in one form or another. Where are all those people? We don't have millions of devotees in the temples. We don't even have millions of people at Rath Yatra. Maybe 20, 30, 40, 50,000 max. So where are all those people? Those seeds have been planted on Prabhupada's order, and they will fructify. We see gradually all of these bad people with their bad desires and their bad interactions will be replaced by persons who take birth in Krishna conscious families or take birth with Krishna conscious intentions. That is what we're looking at. Prabhupada's movement is not just for the 50 years or so that it's been in existence, it's for the next 10,000 years. And Prabhupada himself said this, you may have heard the phrase, that my books will be the law books for the next 10,000 years. It's not something that we made up. Prabhupada said that himself, that his books will be the law books for humanity for the next 10,000 years. So we should all be encouraged. Don't be discouraged. Keep on chanting Hare Krishna and try to give it to as many people as possible. Those family members who tried to drag me away in 73, they're now quite favorable. My sister, she's still a died in the world Christian, but I don't dare visit her without bringing prasadam. Specifically, samosa. So there is hope for humanity because of the strong desire of His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. So now we will do the Pushpanjali for Srila Prabhupada and then the simultaneous arti. Hare Krishna.
If I could have your attention just for a moment. Hare Krishna. Hari Bol. If I could have your attention. We've made some arrangements in Govinda's next door buffet. We're not officially open, but we felt that we could have the Prabhupada disciples please come there for lunch to bless it so it can become a successful project. So those of you that are Prabhupada disciples, please go to the buffet next door and we'll serve out the Prabhupada feast to all of you. Thank you very much. Now everyone should take some flowers. We're going to push Panjali for His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. Om Agyana Timirandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Umilitam Yena Tasmai Sri Guruve Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kada Mayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakanvitamscha Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swamin Iti Namine Namaste Sarasvate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Paskacha Desatarine Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktisaranta Sarasvatiti Namine Shri Varshabhanavi Devi Daitaya Kripabdaye Krishna Sambandha Vijnana Daine Prabhave Namaha Madhu Yojvala Premadya Shri Rupanuga Bhaktida Shri Gora Karuna Shakti Vigrahaya Namostute Namaste Gauravani Sri Murtaye Dinatarine Rupanuga Viruddha Pasadanta Dvanta Harine Namo Gora Kishoraya Shakshad Vairagya Murtaye Vipralamba Rasambode Padambujaya Te Namaha Namo Bhaktivinodaya Satchid Ananda Namine Gora Shakti Swarupaya Rupanuga Varayate Gora Virbhava Bhumes Tvam Nirdeshta Sajjana Priya Vaishnava Sarvabhauma Shri Jagannathaya Te Namaha Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhuvebhyacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Namo Maha Vadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gauratvise Namaha Pancha Tattvatmakam Krishnam Bhaktarupa Swarupakam Bhaktavataram Bhaktakyam Namami Bhakta Shaktikam He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dina Bandho Jagapate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Jayatam Suratau Bangor Mama Manda Matir Gati Matsarvasya Padambojau Radha Madana Mohano Divyad Viranranya Kalpa Drumada Srimad Ratnagara Singhasana Sto Srimad Radha Śrīla Govinda Devo Prishtalibi Sevyamano Smarami Shriman Rasa Rasarambi Vamsi Vata Tata Shtita Karshan Venusvanayar Gopir Gopinata Shriye Stuna Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavanishvari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swamin Iti Namine Swamin iti namine namaste Sarasvate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavari Paskacha Desatarine Esha Pushpanjali Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swamin Iti Namine Namaste Sarasvate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Paskacha Desatarine Esha Pushpanjali Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swamin Iti Namine Namaste Sarasvate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Paskacha Desatarine Esha Pushpanjali Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.
Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namine Saradam Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Pastata Desatarine. Samsara Dava Naradira Loka Chanaya Karunya Ganadganata Praptasya Kalyana Gunaravasya Bande Guru Sri Charanaravinda Aptakalyana Gunaravasya Bande Guru Sri Mahaprabhu Kirtanarita Gita Vaditra Madhyan Manazora Zena Romanta Kampa Sutaranga Vajo Bande Guru Sri Charanaravinda Shri Vigrahara Dhara Nityananam Shingara Tanmandira Majanado Shingara Tanmandira Juktasya Bhaktan Chariyunjatopi Bande Guru Sri Charanaravinda Nasyan Chaturvidha Sri Bhagavat Prasadan Swadana Triptan Hari Bhakta Sangam Navirasi Sadan Swadana Triptaiva Triptrim Bhajatak Sadaiva Vande Guru Sri Charanaravinda Shirarika Madhavyoda Padam Madhuya Lila Gunarupanam Nayalika Yoda Padam Madhuya Lila Pratiksana Sadhana Lolavasya Bande Guru Sri Charanaravinda Nikunda Juno Rati Kelly Sidai Yaya Lubin Yuktira Paksani No Yaya Lubin Tradradi Daksha Nati Valavasya Vande Guru Sri Charanaravinda Vande Guru Sri Charanaravinda Vande Guru Sri Charanaravinda Vande Guru Sri Vande Guru Sri Charanaravinda Vande Guru Sri Charanaravinda Vande Guru Vande Guru Sri Charanaravinda Vande Guru Sri Charanaravinda Vande Guru Sakshat Haritena Samasta Shastre Uktastata Bhavyata Iva Sadre Samasta Shastre Uktastata Tu Praboya Piya Eva Tasya Vande Guru Sri Charanaravinda Yasya Prasadan Bhagava Prasado Yasya Prasadan Nagati Gatopi Yasya Prasadan Bhagava Prasado Yasya Prasadan Nagati Gatopi Yasya Prasadan Dayang Stuvangsta Yasya Stri Sanjam Vande Guru Sri Charanaravinda Bande Guru Sri Charanaravinda. 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 Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Prabhupada, 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 Prabhupada. Sri Guru Charana Padma Kevala Bhakati Sadma. Sri Guru Charana Padma Kevala Bhakati Sadma. Bandhan mui sabadhanam mate. Bandhan mui sabadhanam mate. Jahara brasa debai. Hey, Bhavatari Aja. Jara Brata Debai. Hey, Bhavatari Aja. Krishna Prapti Hoy Jahan Hoyte. Krishna Prapti Hoy Jahan Hoyte. Guru Mukha Padma Bhakya Chite te koriyai kya. Guru Mukha Padma Vakya Chite te koriyai kya. Anago de Omane Asha. Aranako de Omane Asha. Sri Guru Charane Rati Aise Utamagate. Shri Guru Charane Rati Aise Utamagate. Jai Prasade Pure Sarvam Asham Jai Prasade Pure Sarvam Asham Chakudana Dilote Janme Janme Prabhu se Chakudana Dilote Janme Janme Prabhu se Divya Gyan Hriday Prakasito Divya Gyan Hriday Prakasito Preme Bhakti Jaite Avijja Vinasha Jate Preme Bhakti Jaite Avijja Vinasha Jate Preme Bhakti Jaite Avijja Vinasha Jate Vedikai Jaracha Rito Vedikai Jaracha Rito Shri Guru Karuna Sindhu Adamajanara Bandhu Shri Guru Karuna Sindhu Adamajanara Bandhu Lokenath Lokera Jivana Jai Prabhupada Lokera Jivana Jaya Prabhupada Lokera Jivana Prabhu Koro Jaya De Hamare Varajaya Prabhu Koro Jaya De Hamare Varajaya Eve Asko Sutribhuvana Hey, Eve Asko Sutribhuvana Śrīla Prabhupada Patita Pavana Jaya Prabhupada Patita Pavana Jai Prabhupada Laila Sharana Shri Guru Karuna Sindhu Adamajanara Bandhu Shri Guru Karuna Sindhu Adamajanara Bandhu Oh Lokenath Lokera Jivana Hey Lokenath Lokera Jivana Prabhu Koro Doya Jai Hamare Varachaya 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 Haram Boy Doy De Hamare Varachaya Jaya Prabhupada 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 Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada. 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 Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhakta
Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare,
Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, Krishna Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Prabhupada, 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 Prabhupada. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Prabhupada. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama. Hare Krishna,
Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Haribo! Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.